Right, right. I just want to. Okay, no, no. I just wanted to check because.
Would it be a freelance gig or would it be
Don't hang up, okay? I want to make sure when they come on.
Wow, I could maybe take some under the old desk. My experience is all back. Send me your flavor. I'm a cool blue guy. You get a good canvas. It's a kind of twist on it. Oh, the little the squeeze bottle. I'll have to ask about that. Yeah. I don't have it over there. We'll get them right in the production. Right. When it tastes test the new flavors. You guys other than that, it's on him. Freshest ever. That's what they tell you that you've made a course factory. They tell you it's the freshest cold you'll ever drink in the course. This guy is card filler. Hey, sir.
Then that is completely off.
Card fell out of your hand.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's in one. Thank you.
Very short.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, man. I love color. Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm. Some nice.
It was after 2 years now.
Yeah.
So, because ABC. Yeah, no, Phoenix, he's profound.
It's all the way to some minute.
Afternoon. My name is Paul Penzone. I'm the Sheriff of Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. With me today I have Mike DeLeon. He's a Special Agent in Charge, Arizona, and Western District of Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're here today to speak about an incident that occurred recently on January 7th at our district in Fountain Hills. Our dispatchers and our 911 operators received 2 calls from an individual who was requesting to speak with one of our deputies. The calls were somewhat cryptic regarding his need, but he was very, very adamant about the fact that he wanted to meet with the deputy in person. And he made some statements during that call to indicate that he had an affiliation with a terror ideology. One of our deputies who was in the district at that time went out to his car initially to review the call and was approached by the subject. He was later identified as Ismail Hamid. He attempted to determine the needs of this individual, and shortly after the engagement, that subject began to throw rocks at our deputy and then pulled out a knife and advanced on him aggressively. As our deputy pulled his firearm and continued to retreat to try to get distance from the subject continued to advance, basically chasing him partially around his own vehicle. Our deputy gave numerous commands for him to drop the knife and to stop advancing. The subject did not, and eventually the deputy fired on the subject once he was within about 2 to 3 feet, stopping him. That subject is stable, survived the gunshots. During the course of this investigation, our investigators, in partnership with our partners at the FBI and the task force that investigates these types of crimes, were able to determine that this individual had for some time frame been in the process of what we would describe as radicalizing. Additionally, evidence indicates in his statements that his intent that day was to further the actions of his ideology, and it is our belief that his intent was to harm that deputy in an effort to promote terror. And when I say harm, it's very likely that he would have tried to take the life of our deputy, who had no choice but to fire on him to stop him. The Joint Task Force has continued to work on this case, which is ongoing. There's several parts of that we will not be discussing today, but I want to make sure that you had a general overview of the circumstances. And before we get to any questions that we may or may not be able to answer, I want to turn it over to my colleague here, Special Agent DeLeon, and he can speak about some elements of the investigation.
Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael DeLeon. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Phoenix Field Division, which covers all of Arizona. First and foremost, I want to commend Maricopa County Sheriff's Office for their great work. I also want to recognize Maricopa County Attorney's Office for their work on this ongoing investigation. Specifically, the Deputy Sergeant who brought this chaotic situation under control, as well as the 911 dispatcher. They demonstrated professionalism and tremendous restraint under immense pressure after encountering an armed individual who we believe to be a homegrown violent extremist, or HVE. This incident underscores the dedication and commitment of Arizona's law enforcement officers and their razor-sharp focus on protecting our citizens and communities. The FBI's role in this investigation is we're working closely in a joint effort with Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and this has happened since the initial notification. As mentioned, the JTTF, or the Joint Terrorism Task Force, is made up of about 20 local, state, tribal, and federal agencies, to include Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, the United States Attorney's Office, the Arizona Attorney General's Office, as well as the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Coordination and collaboration has taken place since the inception of this case. We all work together to share and assess facts and intelligence. Our goal is to identify and disrupt any potential threats to public safety. As you know, I cannot discuss the specifics of this case, but I will tell you, as Sheriff Penzone said, the JTTF continues to work on this investigation in an effort to identify and confirm the attacker's motivation. According to our records, this subject was not known to the FBI prior to this incident. To date, we have not identified any additional threats associated with this subject or this investigation. You've heard HVE mentioned several times. I'm going to give you the FBI's definition, and that is a homegrown violent extremist is a person who is based in the United States, who has been inspired by global jihadist movement, and who engages in a terrorist activity to advance an ideology. HVEs typically work alone. As FBI Director Christopher Wray has said, the primary terrorist threat to the homeland today is the HVE. HVEs pose several challenges to law enforcement, namely that their attacks can be planned and executed in a matter of hours and days instead of weeks and months. What I'm asking today is a call to the community. Our success in combating these threats depends on strong partnerships with all the federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, but more important is our partnerships with our citizens and communities. You've often heard us say, if you see something, say something. And most of us think of an unattended bag, maybe at a plane terminal or in a train terminal, but that's not it, there's more. You need to notify officials when you notice disturbing change in a family member, a friend, a colleague, or a member of the community. What I mean by that is when someone is espousing or leaning towards violent activities. When you see a family member, friend, or community member becoming withdrawn or more isolated. If you notice someone embracing a violent ideology. The law enforcement community is asking for your help. And this includes parents, teachers, religious leaders, community members, to contact us when you see or hear something that just doesn't seem right. As a law enforcement community, we want to prevent acts of violence rather than investigate them. So in conclusion, if you have any information about the suspect and we haven't spoken with you, please contact us. No information is too small or insignificant. Information can be reported to tips.fbi.gov, that's tips.fbi.gov. Also, the Phoenix FBI Field Office at 623-466-1999, repeating 623-466-1999, and also the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, and that's at 877-272-8329, repeating that, 877-272-8329. The FBI, along with state, local, and federal partners, remain committed to preserving the safety of our citizens and our communities. Again, I would like to thank Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone, Maricopa County Attorney's Office Bill Montgomery, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, and the Arizona Joint Terrorism Task Force for their work on this case. Thank you.
As I stated earlier, we're happy to take some questions. There will likely be most that we won't be able to answer at this stage in the investigation. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sheriff Penzone, this is questions for both of you. You mentioned he was radicalized. Can you talk specifically about how that happened, when you believe he was radicalized, and his specific connection to the group ISIS?
We can't at this stage in the investigation because we're still trying to determine the process and other elements to it, so unfortunately until we get further into it we won't be able to share that information.
Do we know if he was American born, and if the name he has right now is his natural born name?
He is American born, and to my knowledge that is his American born name.
What method of communication do you believe he was having with extremist groups?
Again, other information that because of the process in which this information is acquired and the potential to identify other elements of the investigation, we can't share that at this time.
What did he say? You mentioned that he talked about a radical ideology when he was outside the substation. What specifically did he say?
He made statements when he made the call that were specific to his intentions and his affiliation, but I'm not going to be able to give you the verbatim statements at this stage.
So why?
And I know that's frustrating, so hold on just a second, forgive me, but the specifics of the case, because of the nature of this and the complexities of the ongoing elements, the verbatim elements and other aspects of the evidence are not going to be shared right now. But I'll do my best to answer as many questions as possible.
So if he did make those statements announcing his ideology in the dispatch call, why did one deputy go out, and why wasn't there a larger response on this side?
Multiple deputies were dispatched to respond, and law enforcement knows have the luxury to arrive at the same time. And in addition to that, it is all the pieces that come together to form the conclusion of his intentions, not just any one particular aspect of it.
Two questions.
Is there any indication on whether this was a so-called lone wolf attack versus one in which he was directly communicating with ISIS handlers? And two, his actions seem consistent with what we know as suicide by cop. Is there any indication that this person was mentally ill?
Okay, let's break that up into sections first of all. You asked, what was the first part of your question?
Is there any indication of whether this was a so-called lone wolf attack, or if this individual was communicating directly with ISIS handlers or recruiters?
No, Special Agent Dillon was very clear in stating this was a lone wolf attack.
And
hence
then,
his description of this individual.
And then, is there any indication that this person was mentally ill?
We don't have any indication of that at this time.
Why did you guys, why did it take a while to reveal that it was a terror, that he, why did it take so long to reveal the terror charges? In other words, he was, shortly after the attack, he was charged with ag assault. Is there an explanation as to why probably a week later it came back?
Well, unfortunately, unlike TV shows, we work on an investigative cycle and bring evidence together, and our intent isn't always to bring it to the news media or to the community in an immediate fashion, because we want to be thorough and diligent to all factors and evidence and determine if there are other suspects, if there are other links, and any other factors that are going to affect public safety. So we're not going to rush to give you the story until we are confident that we know all the elements that we can protect the community, and that by prematurely divulging information, it could actually undermine our efforts. So we try to do it in the time frame that we deem to be most appropriate, and this is, for all intents and purposes, that moment.
Even though this thread was stopped, you said that you didn't previously know this individual. He wasn't on any type of terror watch list or anything like that. Is it concerning to you that he got as far as he did, getting that close to your deputy with a weapon?
Well, I think that everyone in law enforcement, whether it be at the local, state, or federal level, we deal with those risks inherently every day, unfortunately. Not everyone gives us the flags or the indicators in advance. They don't always have necessarily a long history of violence or intent. And I think that Special Agent DeLeon explained it very thoughtfully, that these things can happen in a very quick time frame. Once an individual who has a mentality or intent can act very quickly with having no history. So we don't always have that information readily available, or may not even be available. So we do our best every day to, in real time, assess and respond accordingly.
I know you're talking about it.
Yes, please.
So to add to that is that was my ploy to ask for just that. If you see something, say something. What we're asking for is, you're right, the key indicators that we look for aren't always present. And so the family folks, the schools, the religious leaders, folks who see these people day in, day out, will be the ones that identify those indicators. Those are the folks who are asking for help in advance before it comes to a law enforcement attention.
Can you talk about his family and can you talk about his family? Like, where is he from? Things like that, and his background, or?
We're not going to go into that stage this time.
Sheriff or Agent, I want to ask this question, which is something we get a lot from the community when we hear of cases like this. You say it's a lone wolf act, but some people fear that more cases like this might happen of connections with terrorism, especially when we've seen the ISIS that they train these people, through the internet or anything. Should people be concerned that there are more lone wolves like this here in Arizona?
I think we all have a responsibility to not only be alert, aware, and cognizant of the factors that could pose a threat to ourselves or our families or our community, but they come in all different forms. And we absolutely live in a different time now than we ever have in the past, where unfortunately we have individuals who wish to do harm, whether it be because of who we are as a nation or other factors. So we don't want you to live in fear, but we want you to live empowered. Meaning, if you know something, as a special agent described, don't wait until something terrible happens to give us information in advance so that we can be proactive. But I don't want you to live fearful. I want you to recognize that we live in a place where there are bad people who wish to do harm, and oftentimes deputies or officers are the target of that harm, but we're all vulnerable. So empower yourself and make the phone calls and prepare yourself. But we couldn't speak to say whether this is multiplying or diminishing in capacity. It's just a real issue in our current state.
Is there any evidence that this individual was consuming ISIS propaganda or participating in ISIS message boards? And is this the first known case of terrorism charged under Arizona state law since the legislature expanded the definition of terrorism in 2017?
So the first one we already spoke to before. We're not going to be sharing information related to the investigation or where it stands because it is still ongoing. And I'm not sure if this is the first one on record or not, so we can look at, do you know
It is
if it is,
not.
Mike?
So the FBI, if you guys remember Maheen Khan from down in Tucson, that was, I think, 2 years ago. AG prosecuted that, and we've had others since then. So we have used the Arizona statute for terrorism prosecutions.
Do you anticipate federal charges?
We're still working together on that. As I was explained to you earlier, the collaboration and cooperation taking place with all the prosecutor's office.
How does the
And I know
level
that
of
you-
urgency or significance change when it goes from being an attack on, say, an officer to an attack on national security and using the word terrorism does scare a lot of people in the public?
Understandably so, and violence in all forms is terroristic. You know, we don't know what's in the mind or the heart of an individual, what they're capable of. And that's why being as preemptive and early in the process to intervene or to mitigate these threats is the most effective way possible. And it does fall on family members and close friends who know the behavioral patterns or the attitudes if they see changes in someone as an individual. And we have to, as a collective community, be proactive to address this, to keep everyone safe, or to provide needs for our loved ones who are making bad decisions or going down a pathway where they may harm others. But it's just, you know, we don't have that crystal ball to predict out all these factors. We've seen the worst case scenarios, and we've seen situations where we could intervene early and prevent these things from occurring. But it all comes down to our effort to work together in this process.
What kind of changes? Can you be a little bit more specific on what changes people should be looking out for? I know you said, you know,
Sure.
personality.
And I'll let Mike speak more specifically to those aspects.
So those are the isolationists, the folks that start retreating from the normal things that they do. Could be simple things as their attire or withdrawing from the norms, and then espousing, as I said, falling into an ideology that espouses violence. Those are the things that we asked you to look for. And you'll see that, and you know, we focus a lot on youth because those are the ones that obviously can be radicalized the easiest. And I believe our subject was 18, so again, not too far from that.
How quickly did the FBI get involved? Was it that night? When did you get the call?
Yes, immediately. We were once we heard that, we were involved immediately.
I'm sorry, Michael, I would like to find out, at least from your purview, if perhaps this young man this could have been a cry for help. He knows that this is wrong, but he's also conflicted and he was still motivated. Is there such a phenomenon?
Well, that's why the investigation is ongoing. We're trying to factor in all those and get the details that lead us to that decision on what actually motivated this individual.
Did
If
he yell
that's the
anything
case-
at the deputy in the parking lot other than what was said on the phone? Was there anything yelled specifically then?
The most detailed I could tell you is there's a compilation of all different factors that took place prior to the event, at the time of the phone calls, as well as with the engagement of the deputy, that obviously in the chronological order, we would have to go backwards to find the initiation of his radicalization, but all those factors contributed to the outcome here.
Did he say things in support of ISIS?
We're not going to speak to any of the statements themselves or how specific they are to any
Sure.
groups.
As of right now, what are the actual charges? I know we haven't, he mentioned we're not sure if federal charges will be pressed, but what are the actual charges at this time?
So there's 2 counts of terrorism, Arizona state charges for terrorism, and I believe there's an aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer.
Sheriff Penzone, I want to go back to that night because from our understanding, he made multiple attempts to contact dispatch and to get a deputy to come outside and engage him. You mentioned that they arrived at different times. How much time between he first contacted you guys before that deputy actually came outside? And was he responding to that call or was he going to get something from his car?
Now, as I stated earlier, he went out to his car to look at the computer, get all the details on the call itself, not recognizing that that particular space, that parking lot is openly exposed, which is a challenge that needs to be addressed. And because of its open exposure, normally it would be a secured area for law enforcement. So this suspect had access to that space and was able to then confront our deputy right at his car, actually.
How many gunshots were fired? You mentioned multiple, and how many times was he struck?
I'm not going to go into details how many gunshots were fired this time, but he was struck twice.
Why charge him with terrorism if you're still trying to figure out if this was a cry for help?
A cry for help doesn't necessarily, isn't a defense for an act of violence or the commission of a crime. Cry for help is unfortunate, and it's something that we should be able to intercede with in advance, but we're still responsible for our behaviors. And law enforcement investigates behaviors, and if they're criminal in nature, then there are criminal charges that are applied to that. But we're not going to negate our responsibility or someone's culpability because of that factor.
Do we know if he had any future plans or plans to do anything bigger?
Again, I know you guys, it's obviously a concerning investigation, has a lot of potential tentacles, but those aren't things that we could speak to at this time because the investigation's ongoing. So I'm gonna take one more for either Mike or I, and then we're gonna close.
I know you filed a motion to kind of seal a lot of the evidence right now. How long do you anticipate this investigation going on, and what have you done so far? I know you mentioned cell phones and search warrants in that motion to seal. So can you talk about what you've done in the investigation so far and what you plan on continue doing, both of you guys?
We don't anticipate conclusions of investigations when they're ongoing because we have no idea what information or evidence will lead us in what directions, and we can't speak to specifics of it. And I know that's frustrating for all of you, but let's get to the core of this. An individual attempted to attack a deputy and potentially try to take his life, and did so with the attitude and mentality to try to further terrorism. That's unacceptable, and it's a threat to our safety as a community as well as our nation. And I'm thankful that our deputy is safe today, and I'm thankful that the FBI is such a good partner in our effort to investigate these crimes. But quite frankly, we're calling on the community to be more proactive with us, to understand that we need your help to get out in front of these issues. And you're our partner in this effort, so we appreciate all of you, but this is an example of a circumstance that should be concerning, but it gives us the opportunity to learn and go forward and hopefully prevent anything like this from happening in the future.
And again, his
So
name and
thank
age?
you very much.
His
Excuse
name
me.
and age?
Correct, and Sergeant Enriquez can get you the details on, if you don't have the public record on his booking sheet.
Agent, how do you
Thank
spell
you.
your name, Agent?
D-E-L-E-O-N.
H-A.
If you wanna, you need to run next door and write it or whatever, I'm sure it'll be